statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for all who have attended today and for holding this hearing on gun violence in America. Any form of violence, with or without the use of a firearm, is a reason for concern, and it is our job to offer real solutions for families affected by criminal violence. It's good and right to reflect on the victims and their stories. What do their experiences have in common, and how can lawmakers respond to the factors fueling violent crime? America has witnessed too many events of mass violence in recent years, yet the common factors here aren't related to background checks for private sales. Thomas Reed, a former Speaker of this House, said, "One of the greatest delusions in the world is the hope that the evils of this world are to be cured by legislation." I'll take it a step further. Today, I think the greatest cruelty in the world is to tell people you will help them in their situation with legislation and then try to pass off legislation that would do nothing to fix the problems that you claim to fix. In legal terms, that's called fraud. When we understand what is going on, evidence is shown, and it was mentioned earlier. I appreciate the efforts of those who want H.R. 8 and many who have signed on. But similar gun control measures would not have prevented Columbine, San Bernardino, Charleston, or other tragedies. It actually indicates our problem today is that we're too far unmoved by the realities of violence, victimization, and murder. We're far too comfortable offering bills that constrain law-abiding citizens without protecting them from the people who mean them great harm. We're far too comfortable talking about tragedy without learning its clearest lesson. If we want to combat mass violence, we have to address the human factors actually driving it. This means acknowledging attempts to criminalize the Second Amendment do nothing to address these complex factors that turn our attention to solutions that would. One of my first acts in Congress was to ask President Obama why federal firearm prosecutions fell 35% under his administration while widespread violence continued to infect American communities. Chicago, for example, prosecuted only 25 federal firearm crimes in 2011 and then saw 506 murders in 2012. It seems clear that if we're going to be in the business of writing new laws to prevent violence, we should at minimum commit to enforcing the laws we already have. Next door to Washington, Maryland illustrates how miserably gun control fails to prevent violence. Maryland requires universal background checks, bans assault weapons, restricts magazine capacity, and permits to purchase handguns, which then must be registered with the state. All of these things that gun control advocates have asked for, but yet Baltimore consistently ranks among the top 5 cities for gun violence nationwide. Again, I implore my colleagues across the aisle to look at our cities and our schools and to respond in a meaningful way. We best honor victims of gun violence by looking at the evidence. Neither H.R. 8 nor any of the proposed gun control measures would have prevented a single mass shooting in the last 20 years. When we point the stories of tragedy without learning from them, we exploit the victims, Mr. Chairman. In 1999, Columbine destroyed families in Colorado. In the weeks before, we knew that the shooters were psychopaths and had visually given threats, but nothing was done. Law enforcement knew. They failed to intercede. Virginia Tech, another issue where the murderer had been involuntarily committed to outpatient health facilities, but that was never uploaded into NICS, and that was not done. If it had been, he would have never been able to purchase the firearm. A month prior to the Navy Yard shootings, just up the blocks from this room, the murderer filed a police report claiming he heard voices in his head. Almost a decade before the massacre, he was arrested for shooting out the tires of a man's vehicle. He was not prosecuted for the crime. A year ago this month, students in Parkland fell victim to a shooter whom law enforcement and school counselors had recommended for mental evaluation in 2016. According to CNN, law enforcement received at least 45 calls about the shooter or his family, and among the calls was an anonymous tip that specifically said he threatened to attack the school, and another call to the FBI tip line. Significant information was never forwarded to FBI's Miami field office, and law enforcement took no action. If we let these tragedies teach us, we see that we need to focus on mental health and missed opportunities. While we're careful to understand by no means are all those who suffer from mental health illness violent, we can increase public safety by improving our approaches to mental health, our compassion and care for mental health, but we also have the opportunity to help law enforcement better respond. It is my hope that we will begin to look at this problem with a larger, more honest approach. The problems of the bill H.R. 8 are numerous, and if I was here, many of you in this audience and many of the witnesses here, my question would be to the sponsors and co-sponsors, why they would give you a bill that is written and guts itself with internally in the bill and will not work. These are the things that do affect mental health and safety. These are the areas that we need to work on. These are the things that we can continue to find common ground, at the same time not offering a palliative exercise to say, here's something that will make you feel better, but not help you in the end. With that, Mr. Chairman, I do have one unanimous consent request, and that is the statement for the record by Republican Whip Steve Scalise. And I will have to also say, Mr. Chairman, I'm very concerned that Mr. Scalise, who everyone in this room knows, was very publicly involved in a shooting last year. We offered, he wanted to come, and many times this committee has offered members the ability to testify and be a part, and then, as we have done in the past, leave. Mr. Scalise was denied that opportunity. I think that is wrong. Him having to put this into the record is something that should be addressed. It goes sort of to the hearing that we're looking at right now. We're making it sound good, but in the end, for those who come looking for answers, don't find it in HRA.